Good morning and good afternoon, dear audience. Welcome to this special webinar series in joint collaboration with Rotary Club of Winnipeg Peacebuilder Committee. Our today's webinar title is Reconciling the Past and Present, Lesson from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Today we have invited distinguished guests and Rotary Peace Fellows to listen to their insights about the reconciliation and its significance in improving relationship between our Indigenous brothers and sisters and us. We are also joined by Dr. Hilal Mohammed, co-founder of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada, and he's joining us from Bangladesh. So before we begin, I would like to do the treaty acknowledgement. The Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, Canada, is located on original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories. We acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Dear audience, the letters and spirit of this treaty acknowledgement is so significant and important today that we'll share our ideas with the distinguished guests. The past few weeks happen to be very sad days for our country. The burial sites of 215 body remains that were discovered in Kamloops Indian Residential School has once again reminded us about our sordid past and posed two very important questions. What do we do? Who should be accountable for what happened? We also remind ourselves, in order for this to move forward in a good way, words have to turn into actions. Without those actions, reconciliation is almost meaningless. In light of this, Conflict and Resilience Research Institute and its collaborator Rotary Club of Winnipeg Peacebuilder Committee wishes to observe 1 minute silence to honor the victims now, and we'd be happy if you kindly join us, and we'd appreciate. 1 minute silence is being observed now. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear audience, now I would like to read out a message from Rotarian in Canada from Rotary International Director Valerie and Rotary Trust Trustee and Dean. And this message was given to our co-host today, David G. Newman. I quote from their message. We would like to extend our deep condolences and sympathies to the Kamloops Secomsett First Nation on the discovery of 215 children on the site of a former residential school in Kamloops, British Columbia. The discovery of these children is a powerful yet painful reminder of our history. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission research indicates that at least 3,213 children are reported to have died over 140 years of operation at over 150 residential schools locations. No words can describe the scale of pain and trauma that First Nation peoples have and are experiencing at this moment. June is National Indigenous History Month. We ask that you support this national time of mourning to honor these children. Honoring Indigenous people is asking everyone to wear orange. Let's work together and show our support. May we all keep this part of our history as a reminder and a beacon in front of us as we work with our Rotary ideals to bring peace and equality to all. Let me now brief you about the conduct of today's session. Ladies and gentlemen, this session is being live streamed in our Facebook page and YouTube channel. The recorded version will also be available in those platforms in our website. Without further ado, let me hand over the floor to David Gerald Newman to conduct this session. David, floor is yours, sir.
I will turn this over to Gerene, who has kindly asked the elder if he would participate. They're both from the New Brunswick area, and Gerene is a Honoring Indigenous Peoples Coordinator for her district, one of 535 or so districts in the world, and her district extends in the United States of America as well. So Gerene, take it from here and introduce the elder, and he can begin this in a good way, and then you will be the first presenter. Thank you.
Thank you. Kwe, Minta Wisi Shekani Robichaud. I want to start by acknowledging that I'm currently on unceded traditional Mi'kmaq territory, and my province is New Brunswick, and that also includes Wolastoqey and Passamaquoddy peoples. I consider myself a proud peace and friendship treaty partner, an Acadian, a New Brunswicker, a Canadian. Want to acknowledge the precious 215 children that were recently found in BC, and all the peoples that have been affected by the residential schools. So very pleased, very honored to introduce someone that I consider a good friend and a mentor and a collaborator, an exceptional human being. Elder Noel Milliea from the Elsipogtog First Nation in New Brunswick. Noel has worked with the Parole Board of Canada for Aboriginal initiatives and offender reintegration. He has taught at the University of Prince Edward Island, teaching education students Indigenous education. He has developed and delivered numerous courses on cultural diversity and awareness. He's developed a healing model of the medicine wheel, which he delivers as a course to the general public to help people with their healing. He's been a national elder for the Parole Board of Canada, has presented as a keynote speaker on numerous national and international justice conferences, including restorative justice and education conferences. He lives a very spiritual way of life. He's a very well respected elder in his community and broader. He's a pipe carrier, sweat lodge conductor. He's lived an alcohol and drug-free life for the past 35 years or so. And he's also a Rotary Paul Harris Fellow. So welcome, Noel. And Noel has accepted that I offer tobacco virtually. Normally we would do this in person. And by offering tobacco to Noel, I'm asking him to accept to present and collaborate with us. Noel, over
Thank
to
you so much, Gerene. And if you can just hold that tobacco, I accept that tobacco on behalf of the ancestors that will be joining us, and I'm be asking to join us today. It's an honor for me to be here to begin this session with an opening prayer. During the opening prayer, I take time to acknowledge all of our relatives and our relations, both the ones here on Mother Earth and the ones in the spirit world. I take some time to acknowledge both worlds and ask for guidance and direction from them. I also ask for guidance and wisdom for each and every one of us on our own journeys, so that we may begin the process of learning and understanding what it is, what are some of the things that we can take the time to focus on that will be leading towards meaningful change. And so I'm going to include that as part of my prayer today. I'll be praying in my own language, which is Mi'kmaq. And after that, I'll hand it back to Gerene or whoever it is. Wala na mi wada mo niska mo chidam sit koi gilo tangi zigana mo ye oli der mi desne nige at mo gigana wada mi desne and tija mi dina nige want to odi gana mo desne and said to wada mi desne gilo ko gilo swana and said wadi dan all dia nego mo gigana wada mi desne and tija mi dina nige at all wajum wala des midway ta edo sabudi da ye nige edo afternoon ne nige gilo mi desne gilo ko no doubting and dangis magic what desne na kizuli abo on what desne mi majuino ka kizuli instead of da mi majuino ta monesta softi uchilon no nige nega we can we des nengil geloko ina masudi la sedwodi mena gisi magic kwa motte sana geloko afti dangiste vali. Thank you so much. So back to you, Gerene.
Noel, I think you're first to present, so please go ahead. And I will follow, I think that's the order.
Okay, that's good. Again, like I said, it's an honor for me to be here. I'm a Mi'kmaq person from Elsipogtog First Nation in New Brunswick. It's always amazing for us to gather together in technology that is wide ranging. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I always like better the human contact. This virtual realm is definitely a foreign way for us to communicate. And why I say that, because the whole notion about the topic is about reconciling the past. It's easy for us to make peace and reconcile through technology. Will we have the same peace and will we have the same reconciliation without this technology? Is it in person? Is it something that we're able to feel each other? It's so important that we always remember and take the time to honor some of these things. The news that has broken last week or so is really of no surprise to us as Native people, as Indians. It's really not a big surprise for us. This is something that we've always had a knowing of. A lot of our First Nations communities are really struck really hard by the tremendous amount of losses over a long period of time. The losses of these children and the recognition of them and the discovery of them is kind of like a little bit of, almost in some way, a little bit of good news for our people and good news for the people in Kamloops area and British Columbia area, because now they will be able to have their children back. And so repatriation is probably going to be the biggest and most important part of the healing process that will follow this. The expression of grief. And as people move into a state of mourning and grieving, it's very important that mainstream society is aware of the why. Why did all this happen? And when did all this begin? And the true part of reconciliation is about change. And the changes that mainstream society needs to make in order for them to be able to understand who we are as a people. The stereotypes that each and almost every Canadian citizen has, these stereotypes of who are Indians. It's very, very important that we take the time and we acknowledge these things, because we can't change what we don't acknowledge. If we acknowledge that there's systemic racism that is in existence, then if we acknowledge that, then we're more apt to be able to make changes. If we deny that and we try to rationalize it in some way, which is a real beautiful part about humanness, it's the ability to rationalize the hell out of anything. And if we get stuck in there, then there can be no change. It's the art of being able to accept truth, and the truth that everybody needs to know is the legacy of assimilation and colonization that destroyed a nation. And it's destroyed a nation only because of the systemic effects that it has had on our people. In my area, in this area here in New Brunswick with the Mi'kmaq people, the seventh generation is being born, and the seventh generation of survivors, we'll say residential school survivor. There's nobody in my area, in my community here, that is not been affected by it. Whether or not your parents, grandparents, family members, or relatives or relations attended residential school or not, it's not an issue anymore. The issue is we all live within the normalization of the effects of all of these traumas. The normalization that happens within a society that is bound together and held in place by systemic racism is a lot of the times the root of the situation and the root of all of the perceptions that exist out there. True meaningful change can only happen once we have acknowledged the reality of the truth and that we are open to be able to receive the truth. And because the part that they spoke about in the truth and reconciliation part was first, and it was in that order, it was truth and reconciliation. And the acknowledgement of the truth is probably a lot of information that needs to happen. A lot of things are still probably yet to come that will inspire people to begin the conversation to be okay to speak about some of these truths. And it's not about shaming or guilt to anybody, it's about healing. The truth is about healing. It's not about trying to put shame or hurt anybody else, but it's more so for us to be able to understand the truth and for us to be able to accept the reality of the truth that exists out there. When we begin to acknowledge the truth and we move past that and we're able to fit the truth into part of change, what is the biggest change that can happen that will be a part of reconciliation? It's probably inclusion. And for us to be a very important part of this process of healing that needs to happen, the whole nation needs to heal. It's not just Indians that need healing. We can get locked into that because then you guys are making us out to be victims. We're not victims anymore. Hey, we take ownership of all of the things that we need to heal from. And we have to be able to be empowering ourselves to be able to heal. And this is probably one of the greatest gifts that we have as a people is our beautiful culture and our beautiful way of life that is very conducive to healing that needs to happen. And so this is probably a very important part for us to remember as we move forward on reconciliation and towards reconciliation. The many different areas of change that needs to happen is very, very, very predominant now. And it's time now for us to be a part of the process of change. In other words, for mainstream society, don't make the changes and then tell us the changes that you made. Allow us to be a part of the change. And that's the most important part of the process. We're so used to government departments and government agencies that really are not conducive to healthy change and healthy inclusion. It's always about the government's paternalistic way of looking at Indians and feeling the need for them to tell us what to do and how to do it. So these are some of the things that are very, very predominant for us. And it's very, very important for us to recognize that. But if there's a clear message that I could send to people today, is to learn as much as you can about the truth, the history, the real history of how we came to be who we are. Because many of our own people don't understand why are we the way we are. Even our own people need to know some of these truths. And the more that we work on healing ourselves, the more our own people will be able to understand the normalization that has happened in our communities. And it's very, very important to recognize some of these things. I know I'm going to run out of time, so before I do that, I don't know if you build in, if there's any questions out there.
Yeah, we'll have to defer the questions to the end, and people can put them in the chat function, and Kaiser will receive them. But that was just a wonderful contribution, and you've certainly set the tone and shown to all of the presenters what is perceived by you to be needed from the mainstream, but also from the Indigenous peoples of this country to work together. Gerene, back to you. And when you speak, I'm not going to introduce anybody. You introduce yourself and say what you want to say. And you're on, and then Rhett, and then Eduardo. Thank you.
So, hi everyone, it's me again. So, Gerene Robichaud, in my day job, I'm a public servant. I'm not here to talk about that. I'm a Rotarian since roughly a year or so. I'm very fortunate that my district governor, John Slip, had this vision of us having an Indigenous relations component in our district. And I was very fortunate to get that role, and I have a wonderful team that works with me. And so, and also connected to HIP. And so over the last year, have really been looking at how do we help Rotary develop education and awareness and relationship building tools with First Nations. In New Brunswick, we have First Nations. And so that's been a work in progress, and it can be challenging. It's difficult in these times, and I just want to make a general comment that I think it would be so easy for people to close down right now. It is so overwhelming, this wave of emotion and of grief across the country and beyond. Especially, during these challenging times of COVID, where we're already struggling. I would really hope that people can stay open here and stay open here as we deal with this. So, in keeping with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, the primordial thing I want to do today is to call upon Rotary in Canada to adopt reconciliation with Indigenous peoples as a special area of focus. And for those who know Rotary, who currently have 7 areas of focus, it's certain that there's overlap with those areas. I really feel, and I have felt this over the past year, and I have had conversations about this with Rotarians in my district and broader, that this is an essential piece. And so today in New Brunswick, the Wolastoqey are celebrating Treaty Day. It's virtual. I was able to attend an opening ceremony this morning, and I was really inspired by some of the things that I heard and the focus, that we're on a journey together. And we get to decide together what our legacy will be. We can't change the legacy of the past. We can't change the residential schools. We can't change any of it. But we can right now decide what our legacy will be. And so they issued a call to walk with us in peace and friendship. And whether or not folks are in areas covered by the peace and friendship treaties, I think that's such a beautiful approach to walk in peace and friendship. I think that we all benefit from belonging, this sense of belonging. trust, social connection. We need each other. We all benefit from diversity and inclusion. The same way that the trees are not one kind of tree, that the fruit are not only one kind of fruit, that in nature all around us, we see the benefits and beauty of inclusion and diversity. And I think this is one file in particular, one area where it's important. And just to look at the first question of the Rotary four-way test, because it's challenging to work in this area. Is it the truth? So I would say, what is the truth? Let that be the question that leads us for a while. What is the truth? Not what we've learned. What is the actual truth? And I think we see some of that unfolding. So in terms of solutions or next steps, I would really encourage folks, whether or not they're Rotarians, and perhaps even whether or not they're Canadians, to do research, to educate yourself, to inform yourself around the history of Indigenous communities in your neighborhood and beyond, and reach out and make some friends. And you'll see by Noel that we have with us today, who's an exceptional friend, that there's a lot to learn from Indigenous peoples. So that's it for me, and thank you. I'm really honored to be able to participate, and thank you to David for inviting me and for being able to include Noel. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gerene. Rhett.
Good morning from Saskatchewan. I think it's afternoon in Eastern Canada, but my name is Rhett Sangster, and I work at the Office of the Treaty Commissioner in Saskatchewan. I want to start by thanking Elder Noel for your prayers and for your words this morning, and starting us off in a good way. And I thank all the people who are online for joining us and trying to make that effort to learn more and do more. My heart and prayers also go out to the families and people who have been affected by residential schools and 60 Scoop and all the different assimilation policies that our country has put in place over the years. I know that there's a lot of Indigenous folks out there who are hurting right now, and that this discovery of these children has ripped off sort of old scabs of wounds that people are hurting. And so I really again, just send my heart and my prayers go out to you. It's been a tough week for everyone. I'm a settler. I grew up in Saskatchewan in Treaty 6 territory, and so I recognize that the number of treaties that are here in Western Canada are the reason I'm here, and my ancestors settled here in around 1900, and have made a life for themselves and have made a connection to this territory and this land that I love and that my kids love, and that I want to do what I can to make better for all of us, and reach that treaty relationship that was intended, and that was the spirit and intent that was intended through the pipe originally in 1867, where I am, or 1876, sorry, and for Treaty 6 territory. So I just wanted to start by acknowledging the tough times we're in, and I know I've been involved in a group of about 115 organizations here in Saskatoon, and we call ourselves Reconciliation Saskatoon, and we're going to gather this afternoon and have our masks on and keep our distance, but we're going to meet in the park this afternoon for the first time in over a year, and we're gonna just hold ourselves and come together in community and have 215 seconds of silence at 2:15, and really looking forward to that. And so I just encourage everyone to find strength however they can, and do whatever they can to move this work ahead. I'm going to speak to you a little bit about kind of what we've been doing in Saskatchewan as the Office of the Treaty Commissioner, and go from there. So Dr. Krauser, if you could put that PowerPoint back on and just go to the first slide. So yeah, just a little bit. I sort of said I'm a ancestor. My ancestors settled from Europe in around 1900 in southeast Saskatchewan, and I grew up here. My background is in sort of diplomacy and peace building. So I worked for Department of Foreign Affairs for 12 years and was posted overseas in Turkey, and then worked on Afghanistan and Pakistan issues for a couple of years, and sort of became interested in mediation and peace building, and then. Thankfully to Rotary, I was able to go for 2 years to Duke University and study about peace building, and that is kind of the journey that has led me back home to Saskatchewan. I didn't really expect that to happen, but I'm here now, and I still sort of see myself as a diplomat, as a peace builder, working in my own home community, in my own backyard, which is sometimes a little bit scarier and a little bit harder, but I really feel like I am where I'm supposed to be. And so I thank Rotary for helping me in that journey. Next slide. A little bit about the Office of the Treaty Commissioner. So we're a federal commission. We're funded by the Crown, by the federal government, but our mandate comes from the FSIN, so the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations, which is the umbrella group of 74 First Nations in Saskatchewan. And we have a treaty table where we bring together the Crown and the First Nations communities to say, what does treaty implementation mean? Again, that spirit and intent that came in 1876 in Treaty 6. What does that mean in today's context? So we have those discussions, but we also do a lot of public education and a lot of work, sort of race relations work, to try to bring Indigenous and non-Indigenous people together and build those relationships. Next slide. So I've been in this office since 2014, and we've been working on sort of real 3 strategies. So number 1 is saying connecting the right people. So who are the people in a community that can move reconciliation ahead? Who are the Indigenous, non-Indigenous, business, civil society, community, elders, survivors? We think that we actually have a lot more in common than we have apart, and we think that if we can create some space where people can come together and get to know each other and build some trust and some relationships, that good people are going to make good things happen. And so we try to do that, and we have 10 reconciliation circles across the province where we've done that now. The second strategy we've had is to say, well, what does success look like? If we can imagine a generation or 2 down the road, and let's say treaty implementation has happened, or reconciliation, truth and reconciliation has happened. Well, what does that mean? And how can we all work together towards a common vision of that future where we're all treaty people? And then third strategy is to say, well, how will we measure that? How will we actually do what we all do and say, okay, are we making progress towards that vision of success? So we've been working on those 3 strategies since 2014. Next slide. The strategy is kind of around a collective impact model. So again, it's this idea that these really complex issues, poverty, reconciliation, can't be solved by one organization or one level of government, but that we need to have a diversity of perspectives and resources and influences coming together. And we need to have these 5 key things. We need a common agenda. We need to shared measurement, a way to measure property together. We need to each do whatever we do best in those mutually reinforcing activities. We need to talk to each other, and we need to have kind of a backbone organization or group of organizations that moves everybody moving forward. So that's what we've been trying to do. Next slide. This is just, again, some of the pictures of the gatherings we've had. We're trying to bring together Indigenous, non-Indigenous communities. The one on the left, that's in Lloydminster, and on the right, that's in Saskatoon. Next slide. Here's a map of all the different circles that we are working in across Saskatchewan. So again, our mandate is in Saskatchewan, but those are the places we've been trying to work again to try to pull people together. Lots of more work to do, lots of more circles to create, but that's where we've got so far. Next slide. So how do we move ahead together? What does success look like? What does reconciliation look like? What does treaty implementation look like? We sort of started in 2014 asking as many people as we could about those questions, and asking, again, a diverse cross-section of society to say, what does this mean to you? What does success look like? And this is where we've come up with, after talking to thousands of people, taking this work to ceremony, consulting with survivors, elders, as much as we can. So Saskatchewan people have told us that reconciliation and treaty implementation has 4 elements. And the first element is we need to understand our history. We need to come together and know that the trauma that has happened on this territory, and start to heal from that and come together and make sure that the people on this land and the land itself are healthy. And so that's the first stage. The second part is that we need to have vibrant cultures and worldviews. So and again, we use the medicine wheel in the teachings, and that I've learned from the elders that I've spoken to. You know, in the North, when we're talking about our understanding of our history, that's the story time, that's the winter time, that's when Indigenous people tell stories, that's when they teach, and that's when we learn about our history. That's the stories of this territory. If we move to the East, it's yellow, and it's the rise of the sun. That's the new day. That's the creation of a spring. That's where we need to know who we are. That's where we need to know have our cultures, our worldviews being strong. And we need to create space where those worldviews and cultures can come together and learn from each other. And we can take sort of this two-eyed seeing approach where we take the best of all of our worlds and all of our worldviews, and we move together to get forward. If you look then to the South, that's the summertime. That's the time of growth. That's where we need to work on our systems. People have told us that we need to have our education system, our economic system, our political system, our justice system working properly. And they're not benefiting everybody equally right now. And we need to figure out ways that they can do better. And we probably need to have Indigenous systems. And we need to have mainstream systems that are culturally safe, and we probably need to have sovereign Indigenous systems that are sustainable and that Indigenous people never ever gave away in their treaty. So how do we strengthen those, and how do we then, as we move to the West and we talk about relationships, which is the fall, which is the harvest time, which is the time of meals when we come together and we build relationships. How do we make sure that those Indigenous systems and the mainstream systems are working together and have relationships and that they again can find the best in each other and work forward? And then we go back again to our history, you know, back, it's a circle, and we continually move in that direction and try to keep that journey ahead. So that's the vision that we've created, and that we've had a lot of really good response on. And that's the hope, is that we can, hopefully everybody can see themselves in that vision, and that we can all work towards that and do whatever we do best to get ourselves there. Next slide. So that's just a little bit more. I won't get into that. I've talked a little bit about that. If you go to our website, OTC, you can find a little bit more on the detail of the vision itself. Next slide. Third strategy, we said, okay, how do we measure progress? So we spent really about 2.5 years now. We've been working on this. I thought it was going to be a short little 2 or 3 month project to figure out this, and it's been a lot of work. But we've really tried to ground the work in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action, in the MMIWG calls to justice, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, UN Rights of the Child, UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, all these sort of foundational documents. We've actually gone through line by line, and we've pulled out literally thousands of indicators to say this would be an indicator of success. This would be a way that we would know we're making progress. The next slide, then we took those indicators and we kind of grouped them together. If you can go to the next slide, yeah. We sort of created a bit of a logic model. And so we tried to group them and make sense of them. If you go to the next slide, you'll see we came up with this very complex logic model. So usually the engineers in the crowd love this guy. For myself, I have a hard time understanding that. It's supposed to represent the real complexity of this work and the many steps that we need to move ahead as a society. We've then taken this and we've tried to make it a bit more accessible. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see what we've created as a growth model. So these are 28 outcomes, 28 steps that can be looked at from 5 different perspectives. We can look at it from an environmental perspective, the spaces we live in, the online or in-person spaces that we have. You can look at this through an individual lens. So where am I on my journey and what do I need to do? You can look at it from an organizational perspective, so where we work. We can look at it from a community perspective, the city of Saskatoon that I live in, where are we? And then you can look at it from a nation-to-nation, government-to-government level as well. And if you look at it from left to right, we have sort of our early stages in engage and learn are more about capacity change. So a lot of people right now are asking, what can I do? And I think one of the things that we can do is build our capacity. We can learn. We can understand anti-racism. We can understand our treaties that are on our territory. We can understand our own ancestral background and how we came to be here, and how maybe what is the story of when my ancestors came here? Did they displace people? Who was then that land that I you know, in the myth of Canada, we were told that land was empty. Well, it wasn't. And so what is that story? And I need to learn that, and all of us can do some of that work. But if we move from capacity in the left, we then hopefully can lead to say, well, what are we going to do differently? And so that gets into, you know, if you're an organization, you can hire Indigenous people. You can look at your policies to make sure through an anti-racism lens. You can actively participate in healing, those kinds of things. And then hopefully, if we all know things differently, then we start to do things differently, and then we start to lead into being differently, societal changes. And so we have 8 indicators or outcomes there that sort of show what that progress could be, that again will reach us to our outcomes. If you go to the next slide. We've now been kind of working, and we've piloted this actually with the city of Saskatoon. We're actually on Monday going to be presenting to city council the results of a process that we did with them to map out at the city where they are. So we can do this with any organization now, and we're working actually to make tools that an individual can do to say, you know, where are you? Where are we on the journey? And then what are the next steps? What are those recommendations that we can make? And then how can we measure impact? If an organization wants to make an action plan and say that we're going to do these types of things, if they're spending money, if they're doing work, if they're doing training, how do we know if it's working? Because really, we don't really know how to reconcile. This is a bit of a new thing. The world hasn't been very good at this, and so we're going to learn. We're going to try things out. We're going to make mistakes, and we're going to hopefully learn from them. And we're going to try to hopefully equip the change leaders like you. If you're in on this call, I would assume that you're a change leader. You're someone who wants to make change and do things differently. So how do we create tools to help you? And that's what we're working on at the Office of the Treaty Commissioner in Saskatchewan. The last slide, I think, is just back to the growth model. So just to show some of the work that we've been doing. And I'll leave it at there and answer any questions. But I just wanted to hopefully just part of this work is to give some hope and to say that there is a journey that we can work together on, and we have again more in common. And our history is traumatic and terrible, but I think we can move forward. We've got to do a lot of work, and unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of more of these stories that are going to come out. Of these children who were buried in places. There's lots of us that need to recognize that. I would argue that the church needs to do a lot more in terms of recognizing its role, and so there's a long ways to go. But I really hope that there are. I know that there are a lot of good people that want to do the right thing, and so we're hoping to create some commonality and a bit of how we work together. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rhett. That is a wonderful, useful engineering approach. It's well structured, and your whole concept of measuring change and moving towards change is so encouraging that this is done at the Treaty Office. I now turn it over to Eduardo to introduce himself. And Eduardo, you'll have a full 15 minutes if you want.
Thank you so much, David. Hello, everyone. It's a great privilege to be here today to participate in this event. First of all, I would like to acknowledge that I'm speaking from Winnipeg, Indigenous land, and just like I do here in Winnipeg, whenever I go to a park, Hantalef Park or Saint Vital Park, before I enter the place, I ask for permission permission from the spirits of past indigenous peoples who lived in this area. So just like I do when I go to the park, before I speak today, I would like to ask for permission from Elder Noel, who represents here the indigenous people in Canada, right? So it's really an opportunity to be here and to learn. So I am I am from Brazil, from the Amazon rainforest region in the northern part of the country. My indigenous heritage comes from the Aruan tribe of indigenous peoples in the Marajó Island. Marajó Island is one of the largest river islands on the planet, located at the mouth of the Amazon River. My father was born and grew up there, so that's the place where I come from. In 2014, I came to Winnipeg to start a PhD in Peace and Conflict Resolution at the University of Manitoba. And the reason that I came here from Brazil is very interesting, and it's very relevant to mention at this point. I had completed my master's degree at Duke University, just like Rhett. I had returned to Brazil, and one of my professors from Duke University, he sent me an email once and told me, you know, Eduardo, if you study indigenous issues in Brazil, indigenous development, indigenous related topics, so if you're interested in a PhD, that's what he said. There's just one place in the world where you should go to study indigenous issues and to do comparative studies between indigenous issues in Brazil and indigenous issues in Canada. And this place is the University of Manitoba and the program, Peace and Conflict Studies. So back then, I knew something about the indigenous challenges that Canada had faced in the past, but not as much. But then I came here. When I arrived here, I started taking the courses in the program, in the PhD program, and then I took 2 courses that strongly focused on indigenous issues in Manitoba and Canada. And also, I had the privilege to meet local Rotarians, one of which is here with us today, David Newman. David Newman has become one of my Rotary mentors. And David, for example, took me to several indigenous-related events in Winnipeg, where I was educated. So I think this topic was mentioned by Elder Noel in the beginning of the session, that it's important to promote awareness, right? That people know the history, that people learn, people understand what happened, and people have that information. So I've been here for almost 7 years now, and I have learned so much about local challenges. And because in my studies here, I also focus on indigenous issues in the context of the Amazon rainforest. So I have been able to develop comparative studies, and right now I'm in the process of writing my thesis, and I'm writing a lot about both countries, bringing those two different histories together, right? What happened in Brazil, which is very similar, as you know. Brazil was colonized by the Portuguese, and indigenous peoples paid a very high price during the colonization process, and up to now, right? As we speak today, communities of indigenous people are, suffering all kinds of violence in Brazil. And most of this violence coming from the local government, federal government, in the sense that the current federal government in Brazil is not only not protecting indigenous peoples, but it's also working to make it easier for economic development to take place in indigenous lands. And I'm talking about mining operations and agricultural, large-scale commercial agriculture, which is really causing a huge impact. It's having a huge impact for indigenous peoples in Brazil. So the first thing that I would like to mention that is absolutely important is awareness, and that we educate people, as David said, Rhett said, I mentioned, and Gerene mentioned as well, and Elder Noel. Not only what they call the mainstream Canadian society, but even indigenous peoples, right? So that's the first point that I would like to highlight at this moment. The second one, and I think Elder Noel and Rhett also mentioned that issue, is the absolutely important need to give a voice to local indigenous communities in this process, right? I completed a master's degree in international development at Duke University, and one of the most critical things in the theory of international development is to hear, to listen, and to understand local voices and local needs. So, and to ask that question: what do they want? What do they need? What do they want on their terms, not on our terms, right? So, what is it that indigenous communities in Canada now, what do they want? What do they need? How do they want to lead the process? So I think this would be what we call a demand-driven approach, and not a supply-driven approach, which is the technical term we use in the field of international development, right? So it's very easy for the Canadian government or mainstream Canadian society to come and just come up with supply-driven projects, supply-driven initiatives, and say, okay, this is what we think we have to do, right? But this, according to the theory of international development, I mean, the best approach would be a demand-driven approach, really bottom-up approach, when we are able to understand, to hear, and to include the needs and the specific needs of those local communities. I think this is a very feasible approach to take once we understand what they need, right? So this is something absolutely important to consider in this process. What I see here, and I'm sharing the perspective of an outsider who comes from Latin America, right? Also an indigenous person. What I see here in Canada at this moment, right? And the way I see it, this is a critical moment. It has always been a critical moment, but now, because of the 215 children that were just, I mean, not the children, but the remains of the children that were identified, and all the situation that came out of this. I was having a conversation with my wife the other day, and when that happened, when I was watching TV and I learned about those 250 children, I said, you know what? In the U.S., George Floyd, I spent 9 minutes and 29 seconds with under the knee of that police officer. That was a single event that triggered a global movement, and here we are, right? Trying to promote change, to affect change, and to address racism globally, right? So the way I see it, this number 215, 215, 215, that number will somehow change history from now on. That's my belief, right? Because the way I see it, we did not only lose 215 children in that specific moment in time. It's very easy for us to say, okay, oh, that's so sad, we lost those 215 children back then. So the way I see it, we lost 215 futures. We lost their careers, we lost their future children, we lost their dreams, the dreams of those children. that never happened, right? So the way I see it, we must move forward in this process of truth and reconciliation. And I think Rhett just shared a very, very good and powerful strategy that they are working on in Saskatchewan right now. And I'm sure there are many other approaches taking place right now. What I see now, and that goes like a final comment from me, again, as a Rotary Peace Fellow, as a PhD student in Peace and Conflict Studies, and as a future Rotarian, because as soon as I complete my program, I'll be joining Rotary. I think this is a great opportunity for Canadians, mainstream and Indigenous, to come together and to make history. Make history in a sense that the history that is being made now and in the coming months and weeks will become a role model for other countries in the future, like my country, Brazil, right? The situation in Brazil is so bad now, so critical. Indigenous peoples are under so much violence right now in Brazil that I see, for example, 20 years from now, maybe we will have a Truth and Reconciliation Commission like the one Canada has now. And 20 years from now, Brazil will need a role model. Other countries will need a role model. So the way I see it, I see a great opportunity in this moment now under the umbrella of recommendations for Canada to move forward, for Canada to be better, to become better, and to set a new bar, right, for this understanding between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. A new bar to set a new bar to set a new role model that will eventually become a model to be followed by other countries and other societies in the future when the time comes for them to have their own truth and reconciliation commissions focusing on the violence committed against Indigenous people, right? I would also like to thank Rotary International and the Rotary Foundation, who, as Rhett mentioned, this amazing organization supported our studies. And I think this is a very concrete way, right? Together with the honoring Indigenous peoples and all the other initiatives promoted by Rotary, that Rotary is taking action. Rotary is taking action to address those issues by the by the movements organized by the Rotarians themselves, but also the work of Rotary Peace Fellows like Rhett and myself, who are working on these issues, addressing these issues, and trying to make a positive difference. Right? So thank you so much for the opportunity, and I'll be here for questions. Thank you so much.
Wow, thank you, Eduardo. Just a wonderful perspective from someone whose own country is going through enormous challenges in relation to the evolution of human relationships between peoples. And I'm going to turn it where you can blame me for all the time issues. We've heard some amazing presentations. I'm now going to turn it over to Kauser to manage this, because he's the one that controls the switch that he can turn us off when he wants to. But thank you for hosting, Eduardo. And if Hilal could make some comments, and then you, and then closing with the elder, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, David, very much. Such a wonderful session today. Let me welcome our co-founder, Dr. Hilal Mohammed, to briefly share his comments. We are just about to close this session. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from Dr. Hilal. Thank you, sir.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am especially thankful to Eduardo Noel and Gerene and Rhett to contribute in a very meaningful way in this session. especially Rhett's presentation and Eduardo's reflection on his own country was really enlightening, and we have learned a lot. I can make a good connection of these experiences with my country. Now, after TRC, the Truth and Reconciliation efforts that have taken place in Canada, after that, many countries are inspired and influenced, and they are also looking back of the atrocities and the perpetration of crimes against humanities, even in Bangladesh, even in India, and these countries are thinking about looking into the past during the colonial period. There are different events that were just put under files and tables, but now these people, especially the citizens of these countries, are now thinking to bring them out. In my country as well, there are indigenous communities, and they have underwent different phases of historical injustice. They are also having a voice after Truth and Reconciliation movement that really made a landmark progress in Canada, and we are still talking about that. The recent incident that happened a few days ago, and the news that broke out, it created a new buzz again in my country too. I was building some courses, indigenous knowledge system, especially in my courses that I was teaching in the university where I am teaching in my courses. And the students just lately started to ask me about those days, the black days that tainted the history of humankind, especially in the Canadian context. So we are having spaces and windows to share with people. People are knowing more, and it's a very positive progress indeed. The presentation that Rhett has given today, probably it would be a good, I think, way out for us, a kind of gateway to understand the reconciliation process, how they are engaging civil society people and others. But the final words, in my final words, I would just thank once again Gerene and Elder Noel about diversity and inclusion. These two terms are really being importantly discussed in different arena in Bangladesh community, in the development, among the development practitioners, among the educators, and among the social thinkers. Being a sociology educator in Bangladesh, I often try to bring those examples and those instances in Bangladesh context, because these days, especially this time, different types of newer conflicts are emerging in societies, as Eduardo reflected from his community. The same experiences we are undergoing the same experiences in our country too, and probably after 20 or 30 years or 40 years, we will need to think about reconciliation of these days, past days that are really going against the current of humanism and the expectation of people about equality, justice, and inclusion. So we need to have people included, and we need to have diversity respected. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hilal. So my plan is to just summarize briefly about some of the key aspects of today's session, and then hand over the floor to Elder Noel to finally conclude and to listen to his last words. In this session, ladies and gentlemen, and dear audience, we have listened to some of the wonderful insights from our panelists. For example, the Elder Noel first started and he gave us some idea about many of the issues that is happening in our country now. But the main takeaway that I have learned from his part of the speech is the change, and he's talking about the change in our system. And the important aspect that he mentioned is let's not change the system and ask others, especially our indigenous brothers and sisters, to adapt to change. Let them be part of change. And this is so important for me, that how do we bring people together in the transformation of our system. And also he mentioned about knowing the truth, and this is why it is so important. Before we talk about reconciliation, knowing the truth is the most important part. Then we have our speaker, Gerene, and she spoke about legacy, and she also emphasized about her work and knowing the truth itself. Then we listened to Rhett's presentation. Since he works at the Treaty Commission, he has wonderful knowledge he shared with us today, how they are working towards reconciliation with a broader community for change. And of course, when we listen to Eduardo, we have understood how Brazilian community is adapting to all these changes and the reflection from the indigenous community. And he ended with a very beautiful sentence that the significance of 215 is not about the number or the lives lost. It is about the 215 futures that we lost, the careers, that hopes and dreams of 215 human beings that we lost. The audience and ladies and gentlemen, before I hand over finally to Elder Noel, let me quote and share with you my own ideas, which I borrowed today from Nelson Mandela and his, I would say, very well written book, Long Walk to Freedom. Here, he said, and I quote here, which is very relevant, maybe for all of us. And he's saying that I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way. But I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. Unquote. The audience and ladies and gentlemen, I leave it with these words, and now I hand over to Elder Noel. Sir, floor is yours to conclude this session. And once again, I thank you on behalf of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute and Rotary Club of Winnipeg Peacebuilder Committee to have this session organized and listen to all these sage words from our distinguished panelists. Elder Noel, floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much. It's a beautiful way for us to start off a weekend and getting back to our families and our loved ones and getting ready to do some meaningful times with our families and our loved ones. So at this point in time, I'm just going to do a quick closing prayer and maybe just leave you with these thoughts about how can we address the humongous loss and how can we cope with the realities within our own mainstream society. So many people appalled, and like I had said earlier, it's not about placing any shame or guilt on anybody, but more so an acknowledgement of the reality of systemic trauma. Uh, and it's all found within what you would term as genocide that has happened. And that genocide is still in operation and continuance today with the mindset of our government in regards to finding ways on how we can get rid of the Indian problem. That process and that format has not changed to this day, and they're still moving towards that. And so as we take some time to think about some of these things, it's important to recognize the land that we're on. Everybody always acknowledges the land that we're on is native land, and we welcomed our relatives and our relations as guests into our beautiful land that we're on. And they called it new land, and we called it a new world. They called it many things, but for us it was home, and it always has been. So I'm going to leave and ask the ancestors to take care of each and every one of you and all the guests that are out there. It was an honor for me to be a part of this process. I want to give thanks to the Rotary for the much work that they do in all different areas of the world in regards to fellowship and helping in any way that they can. Well, Ali got me what I'm on this come get now because you get me all the other me doesn't and Mugi can water we doesn't and teacher amazing that nigga. What you want us consider me my doing with an emo to nigga. it'll six of my body jigniga a moody Mugi and war what a scotija amijua, what am a balladist, Mutigin Mawalad no da, Munegamoko, and nigga, again we just name sit and not all the men I'm so quite easy like, don't think what nigga, I don't put Tija, Miss nigga, or Wajum out in Wajum and I'm sitting much window. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you very much, Elder Noel. And dear audience, enjoy the rest of the day. And as we said that we are very thankful for the opportunity. And as I am showing our main takeaway from this session, let's walk in the path of reconciliation together. Goodbye. Take care.